Welcome back to the podcast and to the latest instalment of Two Blues Tuesday, our weekly catch-up show talking all things Chelsea FC. And I am joined by Mr. C Money Picks, as this week we focus somewhat surprisingly on outgoings. Yes, Chelsea have been buying up every single available player across the front line, but this week there has been a mass exodus. A few players to talk about with confirmed outgoings already, and a few rumours still to be done, a few deals still to be finalised. But it looks like Chelsea are doing some impeccable, when don't we? But it looks like Chelsea are doing even more impeccable business on the outgoing side. So before we get into that, because there is a lot to talk about, Charms, how's things, man? There has been a lot going on, not just in the transfer window, but a lot going on with Chelsea and football in general this week.
Yeah, 100%. I think that this is probably one of those massive transfer windows where all of these players come in and out, and there's this massive switching and changing of the guard all about. I mean, for me, I think that the Isak drama has been huge. I think that the media has been well aware of what's been going on there. Everything from Isak training at Real Sociedad on a personal one, to not arriving at Newcastle, to kind of saying that he wants to go to Liverpool, and on top of that, we've got players like Benjamin Sesko, who are in between that battle between Newcastle and United, saying he wants to go to United. I can't remember the last time all of these strikers that have been at the top of their game have wanted all of these moves in the way that they have, particularly with Man United not really being the Man United of old. You got players like Benjamin Sesko, who I rate really big time, wanting to make the move to the club. Obviously, they've already snapped up players like Matheus Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo, who have been proven in the Premier League. So it's very interesting transfer window, all of these players moving about. And I just, obviously it's easy for us to look at Chelsea, but I think all the other clubs in and around the league have also been doing their thing in silence to kind of make these massive moves. I think Victor Gyökeres is going to have a great season. I mean, if you watch my FPL video, you'd know how I feel about that. He's already been placed in my squad. So, yeah, I think that for the first time in a long time, we're going to see a bunch of very, very touted players go into very, very big clubs and make some very, very big moves.
See, and obviously fans of the show will remember that we spoke about our preferred strikers if Chelsea were going to go in for a number 9. And we both said those two names there, Gyökeres and Sesko. I'll be honest, I mean, it was a player that I was thinking, this is the final piece of the puzzle for Arsenal. But he came on against Tottenham and he looked like a different player, bro. He looked like he couldn't run, looked like he couldn't track the ball. Listen, man, I was scared. I was telling people, Arsenal aren't going to do niche. Arsenal still haven't found that final piece. When they announced that they'd signed Gyökeres, I was like, shit, this is it. This is the guy. This is the one that's going to take him to that next level. After 15 minutes in a pre-season friendly against Tottenham in Hong Kong, hey, I'm still praying on the downfall. But interestingly, what do you make of all this Liverpool transfer business? Because to break the transfer record twice in a single window would be nuts. But on top of that, the way in which they've done the business, and we've got to be careful here because we're undoubtedly going to get a couple of hypocritical comments being Chelsea fans. But there is a lot going on with Liverpool at the moment, not just the excessive spending. That Coutinho money glitch seems to be infinite at this point, but Jamie Carragher gives us stick all season for, offloading players to Saudi, even though it was, 2-3 players. They're doing some interesting deals. Darwin Núñez, 90 mil to Saudi Arabia, supposedly washing money through that way. And also the way in which they approached the deal. I mean, there's two clubs, aside from Chelsea, which have had extremely busy windows. One very good, one very poor. And the very poor is Newcastle. And Liverpool seemingly said to Newcastle, go ahead, go and get Ekitike, we'll take Isaac. Newcastle said no. So Liverpool said, fuck you, we'll take Ekitike. And then we'll also stink up the gaff and make Alexander Isak refuse to train or refuse to play for you again. I feel a little bit sorry for Newcastle, given that they got Champions League, they signed Alanga early doors. I feel a little bit sorry for them this summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to feel necessarily sorry for either, for a team like Newcastle, but especially being that, in my opinion, they've had the best striker in the Premier League, kind of underpaid for the ability that he's got. I think that Liverpool have pretty much signed Darwin Núñez's death warrant with all these rumours around the striker hubbub. I mean, he's not actually gone anywhere yet, and the player said that he wants to try and stay in the Champions League football club, so I can't imagine Saudi's at the top of his list. He's probably kicking and screaming for that move to not go through. But 90 million for a player like that, you've just got to go out there and take it. And I mean, when they signed Ekatike, I felt like that was them saying, it's all right, we don't need Isak. But the fact that there's, still heavy, I wouldn't even just call them rumours. I think it's bona fide speculation at this point that Isak is going to be making the move to Liverpool in this window. I think that them two up top together is something that I think a lot of clubs in world football, to some degree, including Chelsea, would really be envious at. Having two players of that ability fresh into the club with all that want and all that desire to try and kick ball. And we've all seen Isak. He's deadly from 30 yards. He's deadly from 10 yards. He can do the full thing. And Ekatike is one of those players we just got to see how that transitions, particularly in things like the Champions League with all the intensive amounts of football you've got to play being an English club. But yeah, Newcastle definitely, once again, I can't really go far and say I feel bad for them, but they've, I remember not too long ago, it was like, if Isak, something happens to him, at least we've got Callum Wilson. And now who they got? They got a player that I can't remember his name. He scored 1 goal in the Premier League last season if they get rid of Isak up top, if they don't make any signings. So, and it seems like a lot of these players that they've been rumoured to go and get. I remember there was rumours that they wanted Mbeumo. He's gone to United. They wanted Joao Pedro. He comes to Chelsea. It seems like everyone that they have an interest in finds a bigger and better club that they can link themselves to. And I think it comes down to wage demands and what the teams can offer them, guaranteed, Champions League football and whatnot in the history. And I know that they've got that as well. But when you boil it down to what are they going to be able to provide, you're going to have to do so much based on what you're going to get back out of the club. So, yeah, I think Newcastle have had a bit of a struggler with it. And I think a lot of other clubs have kind of poached their targets. And I think that if they do lose Isak, I think it's going to be a really long day for them.
But even the Champions League thing, I mean, they obviously secured Champions League last year. They've then put in a bid for Benjamin Šeško, 85 million euros. Manchester United have matched that bid and are being told, supposedly, that Šeško would rather join Manchester United than Newcastle. I'm sorry, but how are you looking? This is the perspective, and to put into context why I feel sorry for them, because I just don't understand how a player, wages aside, you can pay them whatever you want. We know Manchester United have probably got very, very deep pockets. But realistically, who's looking at Manchester United and Newcastle as two opportunities, one of which has Rasmus Højlund, Mbeumo, Cunha, Bruno Fernandes? You've got a lot of high value assets that have only been bought in recently. Whereas Newcastle, you're looking at this and going, you know what? I could spearhead the project. I've got UCL football next season. I'm going to be... Look at Shearer, Isaac, like they are legends up in Newcastle. And I just think it's a little bit sad. Again, we see it all the time that people are prioritising money over the love of the game when they go to Saudi. But to see it happen in the Premier League, to me, it's a little bit like, really? Like, if you're going to make the move, if you're going to make that transition from Bundesliga to a big club in the Premier League, big money move, you might as well do it to a team that's playing in the elite competitions. But Newcastle fans, let me know. Am I being a little bit too generous? Is it just your board doing absolutely horrendous work behind the scenes? But we'll move on to Chelsea now, because we do have plenty to cover. And we'll start with a triple whammy. As I said, we have been extremely busy buying up players, but for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Triple whammy of Leslie Ugochukwu, Armando Broja, and Kiernan Dewsbury Hall leaving the club over Sunday, Monday. 3 players, £70 million recoup. Chelsea are now officially in £200 million in terms of player sales this summer. Charms, just very quickly going through, we'll go through those, the 2 Burnley players first. Obviously, Ugochukwu joined Chelsea 23 mil in August 2023. He played 15 games in his first season, and now he's moving to Burnley for 20 mil. So I think, 3 mil loss overall, but on the books, it's positive for us. I'm not really worried about that kind of loss. But in terms of him as a player, what do you think of that move to Burnley? Are Burnley getting a good player?
Well, yeah, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say no to that. I think that in the sparing glimpses we've seen Ugochukwu in the last season and the season before that, I think that, he's been a player that's been on a gradual... He's been on the rise. He's gradually showed improvement in confidence in his game, and I think he's good, and he's finally found his position. He knows he's sort of in that centre midfield role, and I like him. It's just when you look, we spoke about this 2 weeks ago. It's just when you look at the amount of centre mids right now at Chelsea, it's easy to even forget he plays for us, and that's not out of disrespect. You know what I mean? It's more so out of respect for the players he's got in and around him. I find it hard to kind of even pick, because when you look at the way that we set up with that sort of two flat midfielders, one sort of 10, that Palmer has to be in there, Caicedo has to be in there. And Enzo's pretty much guaranteed to be in there week in, week out. And when they're not, we got players like Andre Santos who can come in and mix the bag up. And we've got all these other players, and with rumours of Xavi Simons coming in, and all of this creativity and flair that we want. I mean, I just don't see Iheanacho as a player that necessarily fit the system at Chelsea. But when it comes to a team like Burnley, great business. You know what I mean? I've been struggling to see who Burnley have got since coming up that's really going to tick them over the edge. They got Zeki Amdouni. It's hard. Kyle Walker. It doesn't scream as something like a surviving team. It seems like a team that's going to be doing just that, fighting for survival, trying to make sure that they don't get dropped and try and re-establish themselves as the Burnley that we kind of knew in my teenage years, that would always just find a way to float back to 15th, 14th. And obviously, great defensive record last year, especially in the back end of the Championship. But, how far is that going to bring you in the Premier League? Hoping for a 0-0 is not really the way that you do things, especially in this league above. So I think that Iheanacho does give them a little bit more something going forward, a little bit more sort of stringing the ball together, stringing those passes together, trying to get the ball moving. And I hope he does well. It's just, once again, I think that he is more of a Burnley player than he is a Chelsea player when you look at overall ability in a starting 11. And good for him, genuinely good for him. I think that he'll be able to hammer down 30, 35 games in the season comfortably. And I hope he has a fantastic career, and I hope he gets a big move after that. But right now, I think it's a good move all round for both teams included. And I think for the player, he's got to be happy with this move.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say that after the dull season he had last year with Southampton, he might be a little bit like back-to-back relegation battles. But having said that, I agree. I think he will have a good place in the Burnley side. I think he's, that experience battling in the relegation zone last year definitely will help him this season. But I do kind of, on the face of it, when you look at Burnley's signings, it's hard. You look at them on the individual players, as you just said, Kyle Walker, Broja, Bashir Humphreys. There are some good individuals there, but then you compare them to the recruitment that Sunderland are doing with the likes of Enzo Lafay joining last year, Granit Xhaka this season. It is looking a little bit techie for Burnley. So, I mean, obviously, still about a month to go, still a few signings to make, but I think it's a good move for him. And similarly for Broja. Look, I did a double take when I checked that Armando Broja is older than both Dilap and João Pedro. I couldn't believe that. It seems like I'm, still talking about the same 18, 19-year-old that's, looking to break through, but he's been that guy for 5 years now. And all the best to him. I think he has all the qualities needed to succeed and to become a great striker. I think a team like Burnley is bottom half of the table is right for him. Just he needs to stay injury free. If he can stay injury free, I have no doubt he'll score 10, 15 goals for them. And he can be a very, very good signing. But yeah, I mean, it just depends how quickly they give up. It depends if they're still in it by Christmas, it could go fine. But if they're not, it could go very, very south. But obviously 20 mil of pure profit there, given that he is an academy player. And, well, 0.01 mil loss on Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. Now, this one has got football Twitter up in arms. They're calling him the Conference League Messi. And look, model professional, great all-round guy, seems to have benefited the team very well last season. Obviously, you weren't going to say niche about being on the bench because he was never at the level of Chelsea. So to be able to spend 30 mil last season, get a player that the manager's familiar with, and then recoup 29.9 or 29.4 or whatever it is, I think very, very good deal. And while he's a great squad player, you touched on it before. We got Santos, we got Esugo, we got quite a few players coming in. Are you going to miss Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, or do you think right idea to let him go?
Yeah, I think it was the right idea to let him go. I think that in the year just gone past, I think he definitely earned a lot more respect from me than he had at the beginning of the season, for sure. At the beginning of the season, I was confused as to why we even had him there, particularly after just getting rid of Conor Gallagher. I thought he was just a worse version of him. But in the Conference League, I think he did pretty well, and I think a lot of people can agree with that. I think that he did a lot better than people expected him to. I also think 15 Premier League games for Chelsea played last season. I think it's pretty respectable. I think it's a good thing for his career. He got to show himself off in the Premier League and show that he could, but I don't think he really could. You know what I mean? I think that he had the ability and the time and the space to really show people that he was a good baller. And once again, when we look at a player like Uguchukwu, and this is with all due respect, where he looks like a player that would really fit into a team that's in the bottom half of the league, trying to stay afloat. I think that Keenan Dewsbury Hall is the type of player that can kind of give you that 10th, that ninth, that 8th, just a pinch above. And I think that is really shown by the amount of time that Chelsea gave him. And I had this conversation with a mate of mine, and he was saying, yeah, but Conference League, like, come on, how are you not playing in the Conference League? Look at the teams you were playing against. End of the day, you're playing for Chelsea in a must-win tournament. There's no question that the Conference League is a tournament we had to go out there and win last season, or else it would have all been up in arms. So the fact that he got pretty much every game, he played 20 games in the Conference League last season and 15 games. He played 35 games for Chelsea just across 2 tournaments. I think that you can't say that for a mid or a bad player. I think he's a good player, solid player, and to get what we got out of him with a marginal loss, I wouldn't even consider it a loss with the amount of turnover Chelsea make. Yeah, I think that he played the role that was given to him well, and I think it's time for him to go and really make an arm for his career. And I think that Everton's a good move for him. I mean, it's not like it's a little club. Once again, with all due respect, it's not like a Brentford where they haven't really got that big sort of following. Everton's a huge club, you know what I mean? And I really do think that it's the right move for him. And have a few good games, have a few good years. He could go down as someone very solid for them.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very, very smart signing. I think Fulham were the other club that were really interested in him. But yeah, at Everton under Moyes, I think could be. They've got a bit of work to do, obviously, to get back to where they need to be. But yeah, no, I think it's a very, very tidy signing, and I couldn't help myself. Given that we sold him for 29.9 million, I had to do a little conversion. So that would be 34.396 million euros. Where do you think that would rank in Arsenal's highest ever departures?
I think it would be top 5, top 6, probably something along those lines.
Third highest. It would have been Arsenal's third highest transfer ever. Let me just say, buddy, he cost more than Alexis Sanchez. We sold him for more than Alexis Sanchez. And yeah, I mean, to make things even crazier, 0.6 mil euros shy of Anelka to Madrid. And to make things even crazier, Armando Broja in 2025 cost the same amount of money as Thierry Henry in 2008. Let that sink in, brother.
Yeah.
Thierry Henry to Barcelona was the same amount of money as Armando Broja to Burnley, cuz. These guys, come on, man. We can never, ever, ever compare. Could never, ever beat us. But now to the crux of the episode. We've done all our shit talking. We've done all our confirmed outgoings. And now today, we're going to talk specifically about one player. It's a potential exit. But looking back on interviews, I think it's pretty much done. Tyreek George, one of Cobham's most promising wide attackers, one of the most promising players to come out of the academy in the last few years, did an interview at the end of the season after his Conference League win with Josh Achimpong and Rising Ballers. And the question was asked to them, what are your goals? What are your plans this year? And Josh just spoke about wanting to break through. This is the club he loves, the club he's always loved, always played for. He knows there's a lot of competition. He thinks he's got the quality to do it. Tyreek George turned around and said, I want more game time, whether it's at Chelsea or elsewhere. I didn't pick up on that at the time. Not a great answer to give in your interview. We'll let it slide because he's only 19 years old. But seems like his heart is set. Seems like even though Chelsea would rather loan him out, he just wants more game time, wants a pathway, doesn't see the progression with all of these signings that we brought in, which is fair enough, and I think was always going to happen with certain signings. But it brings me onto the point of, can we balance the the hoarding? Can we balance all these transfers with these academy players? Is it getting to a point where we are neglecting the academy players? So I want to get your thoughts first of all on Tyreek George as a player, what you want to see and what you were hoping from him this season.
I read a statistic the other day about how João Hato coming into the club was our 49th signing we've made in 4 years. And if you were to look back at Man United's 49 signings ago, they were signing Ander Herrera in 2014. I think that with that, you have to understand that although a lot of rival clubs, particularly, they don't like and they think it's an anti-football method, I think that we're doing everything we can for success. And if you look back to 2000, there's not been a 5-year stretch we haven't won a major tournament. And I think there's a reason for that, particularly recently where we've been going through this sort of dark age. We've won a Champions League, a Club World Cup, a Conference League. We win whatever we bloody enter into pretty much, it feels like. And if not, it will be a few years later. So it is a difficult way of for players to kind of see their way into the club. It's not just about the money spent, it's about the overall ability. We didn't spend nothing on Reece James, and he's locked himself in as a right back. We could have gone out there years ago and then bought ourselves a world-class right back and had it filled in. And I think a player like Tyreek George, obviously playing out wide, it is difficult to nail down a position in there. So I think he's a fabulous player. I think he's a fantastic player. And I think that if we're going out there to buy, a Garnacho, it is frustrating. Because I don't want us to be replacing, as much as I've said for a couple of seasons now, I think Garnacho is underrated. I think there's a really good baller in there. I think he needs the right system around him. And I would have him at Chelsea. I think that if you would, and I've said that, I've been on record saying that multiple times. If it was the choice between Tyreek George and Garnacho, I'm taking Tyreek George. I love the fact that not only has he come out the academy, but I love the fact that the way he plays, it's akin to sort of like that Sterling, that wanting to try and beat a man and have fun on the ball. And I like that. He's easy on the eye. He's a good player. He works hard. And I really like him for it. But when a player wants more game time, you have to give him more game time. Because in the end of the day, this is an entertainment sport, but it's also a business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. And if a player wants to leave and we can go out there and get a lump sum eight-digit figure for him, there's a world in which we don't take it, but there's 99 other ones where we do. And unfortunately, I do feel like, I haven't seen the interview referring, but even just hearing that, it's scary stuff. I wanted to keep Tyreek George here, and I wanted to try and see him develop into the player I know he can be. It's not going to be next season, unfortunately. We're not going to be able to give him the 30 games in a season that he probably wants to play, particularly in the Premier League. Other tournaments, we might be able to give him more leeway, but we just won't. And I know that, particularly with the signings that we've been making. If you didn't think Bino Gittins was a death sentence for him, I think the informed Pedro Neto pretty much confirms it. We've got so much talent out wide, not even in our first choice, that when it comes to a player coming out of the academy, you've got to rely on injuries and you've got to rely on overperforming and you've got to rely on so much things that are just, there are no guarantees. So I can see him leaving, and it does upset me. I really do wish that he would stay and hang on and do fight for that place, because I think there's a fantastic class baller in there. But I just don't think that it seems realistic. And ideally, he moves to a Germany, he moves to a France, so I don't have to see him come up against us. And I think that he would be better in those leagues, to be totally honest, because I feel like he would shine a lot more. But it's sad if he does go. And I would be overly frustrated if he does go just to sign a Garnacho, who give it a year is going to be crying about the same amount of game time. So I don't really see it fair. But I hope that he reins back them ideas and he's happy to commit to this project, because ultimately I think he would probably win more if he does that.
Yeah, no, I'd echo that. I think quite clearly, as much as we both love him, he's not at the level of Gittins, Esteval, Neto. So when you're talking about minutes and a starting position next season, he's not making that front three, particularly with, João Pedro, Delap. We've signed a lot of players who are expecting to be fighting for those places. So Tyreek George, I wouldn't expect to be starting this season. Obviously, last year was his breakout year, and what we tend to do is have a good breakout season and then send the player on loan. Whether it's a championship, whether it's a Premier League, it looks like the clubs that are interested in Tyreek George are in the Bundesliga. But it looks to me, it's kind of a microcosm of a bigger issue. I do feel like there is a shrinking pathway, and definitely with this 2-year window. You know, we're seeing it with Nicholas Jackson. Nicholas Jackson, if you believe reports coming out today from The Athletic and multiple other respected journalists and respected sources, Nicholas Jackson is no longer in the plans for Chelsea's future. So whether we keep him for competition and sell him in January, sell him next season, whether we sell him this summer, that's it. He's had his 2 years. And that to me seems like a very, very quick cycle, particularly if one of those seasons is a breakout season or they do have injuries, you know, like Reece James. We've seen how great he can be, how poor he can be. You know, if this Chelsea model was enacted 10 years ago, would Reece James still be at the club? I don't know. It's a difficult question. And when you look at a lot of the players, and we'll kind of go through a list in a minute of that we've got rid of, a lot of them have gone on to be fantastic professionals, fantastic footballers. But you look at them compared to the squad we've got today, it's very hard to say that they get into the team. And this is where my kind of, I think the main question of, or the main, I suppose, point of this episode is, what's this doing to the fans? Because think about when we were most connected in recent years with our club. You know, obviously Thomas Tuchel club, Champions League win. But prior to that, it would have been, post that, it would have been prior to that, it would have been the Frank Lampard. Would have been the, Mason Mount, Reece James, Tammy Abraham, Trevor Chalobah, would have been that era. And that is the most connected that a lot of Chelsea fans have felt to this club in 20, 30 years, definitely since Abramovich. Do you ever see something like that happening again? I mean, unless we have another transfer ban, another transfer embargo, another unprecedented situation, I don't know if we're ever going to see. And I mean, I know this is going to be a little bit hypocritical because Enzo Maresca gave more debuts last season than any other manager. Do you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here? Do you think we're good for our academy and the way that we're pushing them?
So, I think that the best way to put it is when you look at Mason Mount's departure. I think at the time, you look at a player like Mason Mount and you think, nah, they cannot leave the club. You know, he's done so much for us, been so successful, particularly in Europe when he won the Champions League. You look at a player like Tammy Abraham, amazing baller for us, aerial threat, exactly what we need, second gen Diego Costa. All of a sudden, these players all start leaving left, right, everyone. And even players like, Christian Pulisic. I remember people like, why are we getting rid of Pulisic? I don't understand it. He's done, look how much he's done. If you look at the team now, I don't think any of those players have gone on to do anything more than what we got for them. And I think that one thing that the team inside of Chelsea are very good at doing is analysing when players have hit their peak. There's a reason why Reece James didn't leave, even after all of these injury struggles and even after everything that he's gone through. Why has he stayed and been able to hold down his position when I think there was a point where, very similarly, you'd look at a player like Reece James as a right back and think that he's probably more dispensable than a player like Mason Mount in the 10. I do believe that. But I don't think James had hit his peak, and I think that it was quite clear to that. And with Mason Mount, it's kind of hard to see if he has or hasn't. So hindsight is a beautiful thing. And now looking back on it, I can't really name you the last time that we got rid of a player. I'm like, fuck me, we should have kept him, man. What a baller he was. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, we get rid of these players at the right time, and even if it doesn't seem so in the moment. So I think that, particularly after the Club World Cup, I felt a big connection back again with the fans into the club. I think that there's a lot more of the, we can fucking go out and do that. We were second place in December and we dropped the ball for a couple of months and all of a sudden we're clawing back into fourth, but we made Champions League football and we've done it. And I feel like there is that sort of spinning back round, that circle starting to fill itself up again. And I'm very proud to be a Chelsea fan. I've always been very proud to be a Chelsea fan, but there's been points in my life where I know that opening my mouth and saying who I support is going to lead to just people saying left and right, transfer this, anti-football this. And I'm at the point now where I just couldn't care less. They just hate seeing us win, and it's been like that for a while. So, yeah, as much as I do despise the way that we kind of do treat a lot of our academy graduates and kind of don't really give them that time and attention they need. There's been a few players recently that I've really wanted, like Alfie Gilchrist, to just pop himself into that centre-back and do his thing as an academy graduate. But we just got to see what happens. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. And I'm getting to that point now where maybe it's in oversaturation, maybe it's this podcast that does it for me, and the fact that I overanalyze every single slight micro movement that Chelsea do. But I'm happy. I'm personally happy, and I think that seeing these things as problems and whatnot, I think that it is a little bit. You got to have a little bit more faith because we haven't really put a foot wrong so far. So yeah, I would like to see more Cobham Academy graduates breaking into the fold and doing their thing. But if we're going to be turning around and making pure profit, no one looks at La Masia and wonder why haven't they got a team full of their wonderful academy products if they're supposed to have the best academy in the world. Yeah, cool. They get a Messi, they get a Lamine Yamal. It's not like they're dotted 4 or 5 of them across the pitch. You know what I mean? There's one every eight years that manages to fall down. I mean, I can't even remember Bojan playing a bloody game for Barcelona, and he was supposed to be the next big thing. Saw more games of him at Stoke. So, I think that is just, once again, it's easy to shoot the messenger. It's easy to point the gun our way, but sometimes, these things happen in a business.
Do you think, so using that kind of 2 years as a benchmark, as the kind of turnaround time for when Chelsea will make their final decision on a player, do you think academy graduates should get the same deadline, or do you think they should get a little bit more leeway than that 2 years?
I think the Strasbourg model's definitely helping out in terms of pinging the players who are a bit younger over to Strasbourg. A lot of them haven't really been academy; they've just been the younger players that we've got in. But I do think that this sort of try them out, test them, float them in and out, bring them out on loan, as you said, to a Championship club, a lower league Premier League club, see how they get on, bring them back in, try and massage them back into the squad, and if they stick, they stick. I like the model. I think that it's smart, honestly, and I think that eventually it just takes that one player to come out there and just be sensational. And that could be Tyreek George. It honestly could be Tyreek George. But once the player also decides that he's ready for more time, there's not much you can do about it, And once again, I think that with a player like Alfie Gilchrist, I think that it's a good comparison because I wouldn't say last year was a breakout season for him, particularly going on alone. But I think that he's shown that, there is a proper English centre-back style football player in there. And if he started crying about wanting more minutes, he'd probably be off. You know what I mean? But he's not, and he's willing to fight for his side in the team. And you know how much John Terry's behind him and all of these big words that are being said about him. He's going to slowly find his... And even like a player like Trevor Chalobah, you know what I mean? He's still there. He's still finding his way into the pitch. He's still managing to hold down 90 minutes. And I think he looks good doing it. I think there's been times last season where you talk about who are our two centre-backs, and I think he's one of them, honestly. And I mean, that might be down to a couple of injuries here and there, and we'll see how we integrate Joel Hatto into the mix, obviously. But I think that he's still got a chance of playing regular first team football at centre back. And let's not forget about him. If he wanted the move, he'd have probably got it, but he was happy to stick it out. And look at him now. I think that he's thriving under the blue lights.
Yeah. So yeah, I think instead of saying the pathways narrowed, it's just shifted. Kind of, we're
pretty much
more inclined to give people experience in France rather than in the first league, which I guess is not so much of a bad thing. I think it could get techie with buyback clauses, and if a player does extremely well over at Strasbourg, say for argument's sake, Ish Samuel Smith does extremely well at Strasbourg, and then we decide to go back in for him next summer, it's not going to go down too well with Strasbourg fans. But if, so long as we do keep that balance, and, Kendry Paez, obviously one of a couple of players loaned out to them this season, we got some big eyes on Strasbourg in terms of them developing as a team, and we're going to be watching them very, very closely this year. So, I mean, look, if that's something that Chelsea can offer, slightly more favourable game time, wages, so long as Liam Rosenior is happy with it, I think that would definitely be a smart thing to do. But yeah, as much as I think we both like and would ideally love Tyreek George to stay at the club, I think a move is looking increasingly likely. I just hope that we have some sort of buyback clause on there because, as you said, I do think he is a top talent, really, really good potential. But yeah, I just think when you look at the rest of the squad, it's very, very difficult for all the sentiment, for all the reasoning we have behind us to back Tyreek George. At the end of the day, I support the team, and I want the team to be the best it can possibly be. And I also want the best for the individuals as well. And if that means sitting on the bench being absolutely miserable, getting 5, maybe 10 games a season, cameo appearances off the bench, I want you to do what is best for your career. So while, Ish Samuel Smith to Strasbourg, perfect example, that breaks my heart because I think he's a fantastic player. I've been saying all season, he's next up, he's breaking through to the squad. Left back's nope, he's gone. So there, we've seen it multiple times. We've seen players come back, like Trevor Chalobah, players that have been exercised from the squad and then brought back in, and we've had to sit here and eat. Well, not we, but the managers had to sit here and eat humble pie. Who knows? Let us know in the comments what you think Tyreek George, or Chelsea, sorry, should do with Tyreek George. We will, of course, be back later this week. As Mr. C Money said earlier, we are now back on the FPL, chopping it up with charms, dropping every single Friday. Is going to be FPL focused unless otherwise stated. Of course, there will be some other conversational pieces in there, but we are fully on the fantasy this year, and you can join the Fantasy 2 Blues Fantasy League with a prize available. We're yet to announce the prize. We will do so before the first game week. Oh, my bloody hell. First game week is next week, boys. Less than 2 weeks until the season returns. And Chelsea are back in action this weekend on Friday against Bayer Leverkusen and then on Sunday against Milan, if I'm not mistaken. Same time as the Community Shield. So it's going to be a little bit different this year in terms of live match reactions and watch-alongs, but you may get something this weekend from me if I haven't had too many beers on Sunday. Until then, make sure to follow at Two Blues Podcast on the Instagram, on the TikTok. Let us know what you think of Liverpool's reckless spending. At what point will that Coutinho money run out? Do you feel sorry for Newcastle, or do they deserve it with all this Saudi shenanigans? And of course, make sure to like, follow, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I've been Dan, he's been Charms. You know what it is. Up the Chelsea.